Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive back into history with me. Today, we're heading to August 1945.
A pivotal moment, to say the least. The world's at war, and, well, we're on the verge of the atomic age.
Yeah, the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We're using information from the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons.
I can.
Right, I can. And we're going to explore not just what happened in those two cities, but, how those events, they still echo today, how they shape the world we live in.
Definitely. It's not just a history lesson, right? We're talking about a whole new kind of threat. A threat to, well, human survival, really. And it continues to impact global politics in a major way.
To really understand that threat, I think we have to go beyond those initial headlines, those images we all know, and look at the immediate aftermath, the sheer scale of destruction.
It's hard to overstate it. ICANN reports that 70% of Hiroshima's buildings gone, just vaporized.
Wow.
And in Nagasaki, the ground temperature, get this, reached 4,000 degrees C. I mean, that's hot enough to melt steel instantly.
It's almost impossible to comprehend. And then, you said it, the radioactive rain, covering everything.
Deadly fallout, absolutely. The death toll was, well, it was staggering. By the end of 1945, Hiroshima had lost its estimated 140,000 people.
And Nagasaki?
74,000. And that's just the beginning.
That's where that quote, I think, from Setsuko Thurlow really hits home.
Hiroshima survivor.
Yeah, and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. She said, "Each person had a name. Each person was loved by someone. Let us ensure that their deaths were not in vain." Sometimes with numbers this big, it's easy to forget those are individuals, real people.
At ICANN, they use a really powerful image to drive that point home. It's a photo of a child's tricycle, all twisted and mangled. It belonged to, 3-year and 11 months old Shinichi Tetsutani. He was riding it outside his home in Hiroshima when the bomb hit.
Oh, wow.
It's a stark reminder that these weapons don't discriminate.
It's not just about military targets, it's whole communities, families, and the ripple effect goes on for generations, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that leads to a point that I think often gets overlooked, the crippling of response systems.
Mm-hmm.
Even with all our technology, our advancements, trying to respond to a nuclear detonation in a city, it would be near impossible.
Really? Why is that?
The scale of it, the sheer scale, overwhelms any kind of capacity to react. Just think about it.
Yeah.
In Hiroshima, 90% of medical personnel, they were killed or injured.
Right.
42 out of 45 hospitals were just gone, destroyed.
So even if you could get help in, there'd be no one to give it and nowhere to treat the injured.
Exactly. ICANN states that if we took every single dedicated burn bed, everyone in the entire world, it wouldn't be enough for the casualties from just one nuclear attack on a city. And that's not even factoring in the radiation.
It's terrifying. We think of the explosion, that mushroom cloud, but the radiation, it's the silent killer, the after effect that just lingers.
And that brings us to the long shadow of radiation. We're not just talking immediate burns, we're talking long-term. Decades of health problems, the incidence of leukemia, various cancers, it all skyrocketed after the bombings.
I imagine for pregnant women and their children, the effects were especially devastating.
Yeah, tragically. The source material from ICANN is very clear on that. Increased miscarriages, more stillbirths, higher infant mortality. And the children who did survive, they often faced really severe challenges. Developmental difficulties, physical disabilities, and a much higher risk of developing cancer later in life.
A wound that just keeps hurting across generations.
It really is. The science is, well, grim. The radiation from those bombs caused a lot of cellular damage, and that damage made people much more susceptible to certain types of cancer, especially leukemia, which spiked dramatically in the years after the bombings. What's even more tragic is that these radiation-related cancers, they can continue to emerge throughout a survivor's life, even, 7 decades later.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? That the consequences of these events, they're not just confined to the past. They continue to have a very real impact on individuals and communities today. And speaking of those who live through this, experience these horrors firsthand, there's a specific term for them, right? Hibakusha.
Yeah. Hibakusha. It means basically explosion-affected people.
Mm-hmm.
But they're more than just survivors. They're living testaments to the human cost of nuclear war. And many of them have dedicated their lives to making sure the world understands what they went through, to try, really, to prevent anything like it from ever happening again.
Their stories are so important, not just as historical records, but as a call to action.
Absolutely.
And one story that really stuck with me is Coco Kondo's. She was buried under rubble with her 8-month-old baby during the bombing of Hiroshima.
Amazing she survived.
I know, right? And what's even more remarkable is that she dedicated her life to nuclear disarmament after that.
It's incredible.
It's a testament to human resilience, isn't it? To go through something so traumatic and then turn that experience into a fight for a better future, not just for yourself, but for everyone.
Inspiring. And there's so many resources out there to learn more about the Hibakusha and what they experienced. Hibakusha stories, the 1945 Project, the museums in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Voices we need to hear, stories that need to be told.
Absolutely. Because to understand the true cost of nuclear weapons and why we urgently need to prevent their use, we have to understand their experiences. And those stories, those voices, they've been a driving force in the effort to achieve a world without nuclear weapons. Which brings us to a pretty significant development, I think, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. It was adopted in 2017.
A potential turning point, maybe? A real effort to change how the world thinks about these weapons.
It's a landmark achievement, for sure. And the Hibakusha, their advocacy, was a huge part of that. I think it reflects a growing global understanding that these weapons, they're not just a threat to one nation or another, they threaten humanity itself.
It's a different way of looking at it, isn't it? Not just tools of war, but existential threats.
Exactly. The treaty really emphasizes the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of using these weapons. You can't use them and respect human life and dignity. That's the point it's making.
Okay, so how does it work? How does this treaty actually aim to achieve, a world without nuclear weapons?
It's pretty comprehensive. It bans a whole range of activities. Development, testing, production, stockpiling, transfer, use, even the threat of use.
Wow, so it's not just about disarmament, it's about dismantling that whole infrastructure.
That's the idea. Shifting the global norm, making these weapons unacceptable, period.
Ambitious. But is anyone pushing back? I mean, I can't imagine it's easy to get everyone on board with such a big change.
You're right, it's not. The world of geopolitics, it's complicated. Lots of nations have ratified the treaty, but there are some, especially the ones that have nuclear weapons, that are holding out.
What are their concerns? What are they saying?
Some argue that, nuclear weapons are necessary for deterrence, that they prevent big conflicts, wars between major powers. Others are worried about verification and enforcement, making sure everyone actually sticks to the rules. And then there are the concerns about, power dynamics, security alliances, all that getting disrupted.
It's a thorny issue.
It is. But the fact that this treaty exists at all, that these conversations are happening, that public awareness is growing, that's huge. That's progress.
And it seems like the Hibakusha have played a key role in that.
Oh, absolutely. Their experience, what they went through, it carries a lot of weight. It's been really important in getting people behind nuclear disarmament.
There was a statistic that really stood out to me. A poll by Kyoto News back in 2018 found that more than 80% of Hibakusha want Japan to join this treaty. And given Japan's history with nuclear weapons, that's a pretty powerful statement.
It is. And they haven't stopped there. They issued what's called the Hibakusha Appeal, directly urging all world leaders to sign the treaty. It's a call to action, plain and simple. Put human life first, they're saying, not the supposed security of having these weapons.
It's a good reminder, that this isn't just some abstract debate. It's about real people, real lives that have been forever changed because of these weapons.
And it speaks volumes about their strength, their resilience. They could have easily given up, surrendered to despair after what they went through. But they didn't. They chose to fight for a world without nuclear weapons.
The stories are incredibly powerful. But I have to wonder, where do we fit in? What can we actually do as individuals to support them, to really contribute to this movement? It feels, overwhelming. Like, how do you even begin to dismantle something like this? Nuclear weapons, they're so ingrained in, everything.
It's a long road for sure, but it starts, with us, with individuals. And I think education, that's key.
Learning about the issue.
Yeah. Take the time, read up on the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, check out the resources we talked about, those Hibakusha stories, the 1945 Project.
Yeah.
The more we understand, the better equipped we are to advocate for change.
So knowledge is power, first step. Then what? What do we do with all that knowledge?
We talk. We have conversations. With friends, family, our communities, share what we've learned, express our concerns. It's about starting a dialogue. And that dialogue, hopefully, it leads to action.
It's easy to feel powerless, right? When you're talking about something as big and complex as this.
I get that.
Yeah.
But our voices do matter. We can reach out to our elected officials, urge them to support nuclear disarmament, but hold them accountable for what they do, what they don't do.
Using our voices, our votes, Making sure our leaders reflect our values.
Exactly. And there are organizations out there, ICANN for one, that are doing incredible work on this issue. We can support them too. Donate, volunteer, even just spreading the word about what they do, that all makes a difference.
So there's a lot we can do as individuals working together, but I'm curious, what does success even look like? What would a world without nuclear weapons actually be like?
It would be a world, I think, where we could finally breathe a little easier, where that constant fear of annihilation, it's lifted. And imagine all the resources that go into maintaining these weapons, all that money, all that effort, it could be redirected to other problems, other challenges. Climate change, poverty, disease, things that really threaten us.
It's almost hard to picture, isn't it, after living with this threat for so long?
Maybe. It might seem radical, even impossible. But the Hibakusha, they show us that even after something as horrific as what they experienced, hope is possible. And that hope, that belief that we can create a different future, that's what fuels this movement.
They remind us of the human cost, but also of our capacity for resilience, for change.
They're living proof that even the darkest moments in history can lead to a vision for something better. And they're challenging all of us to pick up that torch, carry it forward.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's clear that the legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it's not just a history lesson, it's a call to action, a call to choose peace, to choose a future where what happened in those cities never happens again.
And it's a call that every single one of us has the power to answer in our own way, in our own communities, in the world. The Hibakusha have shown us the path. Now it's up to us to follow it.
Thank you all for joining us on this journey. We hope this deep dive, well, maybe it gave you some new insights, sparked your curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, it inspired you to learn more, to get involved. Because the fight for a nuclear-free world, it's a fight for our future, for everyone's future, and it's a fight worth fighting.